Hello and welcome to the RICS World Built Environment Forum webinar series. Today's webinar is in partnership with Asite, who is also the forum's lead technical partner. My name is Ken Creighton, and today we will be discussing Sidewalk Labs and Toronto Waterfront, a cautionary smart city tale, ? I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists today. First, we have Dr. Anne Kavukian, Executive Director, Global Privacy and Security by Design, and former Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. We also have Matti Semai-Itaki, Professor of Geography and Planning and Director of the Infrastructure Institute, University of Toronto. And third and last, we have Dr. Stefan Junestrand, the CEO and co-founder of Grupo Tecma Red. And welcome to all of you. We have people attending today from over 31 different countries. We welcome you here today, and I want to ask for your active participation. There is a feature you'll see to ask questions, and if you do so, I might surprise our panelists, fair warning, and ask your question live. So we would very much welcome you to ask questions during the discussion. And speaking of which, let's get right into it. We have some planned questions here with the slides, and the first question is to you, Anne. Was the Sidewalk Labs Toronto Waterfront project inherently flawed, or could it have succeeded?
Oh, absolutely, it could have succeeded. You know, the way they approached me, I live in Toronto, Canada, which is where the Sidewalk Labs Smart City was envisioned. And so when Sidewalk Labs was hired, and they're an Alphabet-based company centered in New York City, when they were hired, they contacted me, and I was, Dan Doctorow from New York City, and the representatives in Toronto contacted me, and they said, look, we want this to be a very privacy protective city. We want to hire you to embed privacy by design into this smart city. Now, I created privacy by design many years ago during my first term as privacy commissioner, and during my 3 terms as privacy commissioner, and thereafter, privacy by design just took off big time. It is the strongest form of protecting privacy proactively by creating privacy protective measures and embedding them directly into your operations, baking it into the code so it's always present. And in 2018, when the new law in the European Union came into effect, the General Data Protection Regulation, they included my privacy by design and privacy as the default, which is part of privacy by design. They included these 2 measures directly into the GDPR. This was huge. And since then, it has taken off globally, all around the world. It's been translated into 44 languages. It is the method of choice if you want strong privacy. So when Waterfront Toronto retained Sidewalk Labs, and then Sidewalk Labs called me to embed privacy by design into the smart city in Toronto, which is where I live, I was delighted. And of course I said yes, and I started working with them right away. And the first thing I did was examine everything that they had in mind and what was going to take place and how the information would be tracked and all of the tech that was going to be put into place literally 24/7. You're going to have this tech on all the time, sensors, cameras, surveillance everywhere. And there would be no opportunity for people to consent or revoke consent or anything because the information, everything was going to be collected automatically. So after I studied it at length, I said, okay, there's only one way we're going to be able to protect privacy. And what I said was, we're going to have to embed privacy by design directly into all of your operations. And how do we do that? We de-identify data at source, meaning the minute any data is picked up, you're driving along the highway, it picks up your license plate number, whatever. You're walking along, you're on a phone, it picks up your cell phone. whenever any personally identifiable data is collected, immediately before any use is made of it, before it is transferred anywhere else, we strip it of all personal identifiers. So you de-identify the data at source, meaning at the source at which time it was first collected. Then you are free to do whatever you want with the data because it is no longer privacy invasive. There's no privacy personal information linked to the data. So there's no privacy concern associated with use of the data. And if you look at privacy laws around the world, they apply to personally identifiable data. And I know when I was privacy commissioner, if the data was stripped of personal identifiers, it's not personal. It's not, there's no privacy risk associated with it. So when I first proposed this, they said, fine, great idea. We'll do that. We'll do that for sure. They agreed to it completely. And what really blew me away was how unfortunately this was sidelined. And I'll never forget the board meeting I attended. And Sidewalk Labs usually consults with me on everything. This is the one thing they did not consult with me on because they knew what I would be saying. So I'm sitting at the board meeting, and they had been criticized for the past couple of weeks by Jim Balsillie, who didn't like not the privacy issues, but other issues associated with Sidewalk Labs. So they were very sensitive to this criticism. So at the board meeting, they said, look, we encourage all of you IT companies that are here, et cetera, to de-identify data at source, but we can't make you do it. You know, it's entirely up to you. And the minute they said that, I knew I had to resign. I resigned the next morning because you see, you can't leave this up to choice. Companies aren't going to choose to lose all personal information associated with them that they could do a lot with. So the minute they said that, I quit. I resigned the next morning. And I remember getting a call from Dan Doctoroff and the others, and they said, what's going on? This must be a mistake or something, right? And I said to everyone, you didn't consult with me on this because you knew what I would say. You knew I would say you can't do that. And what I would have actually have said is give me a week. Let me go speak to Waterfront Toronto directly because I know they believe in privacy and de-identifying data at source. Give me 1 week. I'll get them to insist upon that for anyone who wants to work on this project. Anyway, it didn't go that way. I resigned. But the wonderful thing was an hour later, I did get a call from Waterfront Toronto. And they said, come work with us directly. We believe in de-identifying data at source. Forget about working with them, work with us directly, which I did. So long and short of it is, the Sidewalk Labs waterfront project was not inherently flawed. It could have succeeded easily. And unfortunately, Sidewalk Labs didn't have the strength to resist criticisms that they were receiving, which they were invariably going to receive anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. It's a incredible story, and it's a really great segue into the next question for Matty. How can Sidewalk Labs Toronto Waterfront experience inform smart city projects globally?
Yeah, thank you. So I think to pick up on some of Anne's comments and maybe talk about this in a broader context of city building. There's a huge appetite for change in cities, a huge appetite to build cities that are more equitable, more environmentally sustainable, with a more inclusive economy. And so in that sense, the mandate and idea of building cities that draw on technology or leverage technology to deliver social and environmental benefits is very strong and is a powerful idea. I think this case example really shows the importance of execution and the importance of community engagement and collaboration. So let me pick up on 3 specific themes that I think come out here. First, let's focus on the private sector and the partner, which in this case was Sidewalk Labs, which is which was a subsidiary of Google and Alphabet. So 2 things really stand out in this case. One is hubris. I mean, this company didn't come in saying, we're interested in doing a test project to see how this works and to do some very small scale interventions to make the lives of Torontonians better. This was a company that came in saying this is going to be, the saying that they used was, we are going to build cities from the internet up, and we are going to be making inventions in Toronto and using Toronto as a lab for the world. That is extremely high-minded ideas, and can be very exciting to think of your city as a place that could be on the cutting edge of the entire world. And when you think of a company like Google, which literally has changed the world in many ways through their inventions and their technologies, it actually seems to be potentially plausible. The problem is that building a city is different than building an app. People have different investments, and the idea of moving fast and breaking things, which has been so beneficial and so for Silicon Valley companies, and such a powerful mantra of theirs and mandate, doesn't work in cities. When you move fast and break things, you might actually be upsetting people's lives in the real world. And those disruptions, people are going to fight back, and they're going to be upset about the idea of being a disruptor is actually disruptive in a city. And I think the hubris of a company like Sidewalk Labs, which came in talking about the original pitch for the bid was for a very small site. In fact, what they had their eye on was a much larger piece of land called the Portlands in Toronto, which is on its surface doesn't look like much today, but has huge potential, is the sort of crown jewel, the last of some very developable land right near the downtown. Sidewalk Labs talked about at one point about being a tax authority for this area and receiving tax revenue for this area. They were doing projects all over the city that no one really asked them to do to test their technology. And this started to just get people thinking, like, what is really the goal of this company? Is it to build a smart city, or is it to replace our government? And to take on a much larger role in how our city functions. And I think that, for one, this idea of the hubris of what was actually going on here was much beyond a test site on 12 acres on a derelict piece of land in the east end of Toronto's waterfront. So hubris, I think, really is one area to think about. Second is getting local. This always felt right from the beginning, and Anne mentioned this, like an American company coming in and planning in the east end of Toronto. This doesn't have to be a point around nationalism, but the city building and urbanism is local. It is inherently about local place, and this in many ways it took Sidewalk Labs a long time to understand the local dynamics, to understand who the players were, to have a big team that wasn't shuttling back and forth from New York. And so they assembled like a team of really smart and in many instances well-meaning practitioners, but it never felt like a for Toronto by Toronto type of endeavor. And when you're talking about something as significant as smart cities, that I think is important. Now, many cities have talked about, in this tech world where companies are coming up with these ideas all the time, they've often talked about like having to work with cities to come up with the types of solutions that are necessary. And this, in many instances, felt like a company coming in from the outside and trying to explain to Torontonians what might be a good form of urbanism. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And then finally, there's the idea of what does government learn from this? And for government, the initial idea was government can't innovate on its own. Let's turn innovation over to a private company. And that's what the whole original bid was for an innovation district, and to have a company come in and drive what that would look like. And I think the people of Toronto said very clearly, actually, we want our government to be responsible for what the future of our city looks like. We want to innovate, we want to work with private companies, but we don't want to turn over authority to those private companies. We are a democratic system. We elect people to represent us, and through that representation and through those elected officials, we have a say in how our city is designed and how it evolves and develops. And the idea of turning over that authority to the private company, in this case Sidewalk Labs, I think was a real lesson for Waterfront Toronto in particular, that they have much more of a meaningful role in being the master developer, of being in control of the public interest. And and then working with companies to further that interest that that has been channeled through our elected officials and through our democratic system and public engagement. So I think in this experience, there are lessons for companies and what it means to play in this space and to think about city building, as well as for governments and their role in representing their constituents and the public interest.
Thanks, Matty. Gosh, both of you have just been fantastic in going through that. For the next question, I do want to come to Anne about privacy and ethical concerns. But before I do, we have a really good question from the audience from David Warburton, who essentially asks, what are the next steps for the Toronto Waterfront now? And he recalls his times there and is trying to understand what will happen next. I wonder if Matty or Anne, you want to address that question?
I'll just speak very quickly and I'll give it back to Matt. My understanding, I've talked to Waterfront Toronto, and they basically put everything on hold right now. Perhaps they want to move forward with this again, but I think they were really affected by the unfortunate departure of Sidewalk Labs with what happened and everything, and nothing went well. So my understanding is it was on hold. I don't know if that's still the case. Matty, do you know?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I can fill in a bit of the gaps there. I think what Anne is right about is I think Waterfront Toronto was really impacted by this experience, that the organization had a reputation for the better part of a decade previously as being an organization that was deeply engaged with the community and was building projects in a way that was community engaged. And this experience put them in a negative light, and I think they were deeply affected by that. The place where they've gone since then is to now say that the organization, and by extension the government, is going to play a much larger role in designing what should be built on this land, which is highly valuable and very close to downtown. And I think there's often a narrative that nothing has happened on the waterfront and there's nothing has been built and nothing is going on. And full disclosure, I was on the board of Waterfront Toronto from 2009 to 2012 or 13. So well before this project, but there's lots going on there, and including a $1.25 billion flood protection project to flood protect the portlands to make them buildable. So that is under construction and well underway. And for the Sidewalk Labs site itself, there's now been a new tender. The proposals, they scaled back on the idea of what innovation is and really focused on social innovation and how you build a complete community for people of all ages, also with affordable housing and housing for seniors and potentially long-term care. So they've actually gone through the bidding process, and they're some way through this. So they've, in many ways, I guess to summarize, they've reconceived what innovation is as innovation carried out by an organization that has a responsibility to further the public interest, and then looking for partners who will deliver on that. The partners the companies that have bid are much more local this time around, and so we'll see what types of ideas come out of this next round of tendering and searching for a partner to develop this property.
Thank you, and thank you, David, for the question. We would welcome further questions from the audience. And let's turn back to the core privacy and ethical concerns. How can this be addressed for smart city projects?
You know, the big concern that I found when talking to people in the creation of the smart city that was envisioned originally with Sidewalk Labs was they didn't want their privacy completely eradicated, because you've got a big tech company collecting information about everything, their comings and goings and where they appear. And you can only imagine how much information could be collected. People want to preserve their privacy. It forms a foundation of our freedom. You want to be able to go about your business without fear of everything being recorded and captured. And, you know, this is a trend we're seeing more and more now with, you know, the Nest cameras that houses are placing in the front of the house, people are placing on the front of the house that are capturing people going by and neighbors acting. I mean, there's such a concern with surveillance now. In the last 2 years, concern for privacy has been at an all-time high in the 90 percentile. 90% very concerned about their privacy, 92% concerned about loss of control over their personal information. So in the context of a smart city, they don't want to be tracked, they don't want to be surveilled. That's what has to be addressed. And this can be done. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, when I talked about de-identifying data at source, I was very serious about that because the privacy risks begin and end with the collection of personally identifiable data associated with an individual, your activities, your comings and goings, etc. If you remove those personal identifiers, and we have very strong ways of doing it, using strong de-identification protocols combined with the risk of re-identification framework, we can do this in spades. We have amazing talent. Professor Khaled El-Imam at the University of Ottawa, who is just brilliant in the strength of his de-identification protocols, which can reduce the identification of data to less than 0.05%. I mean, that's like the odds of being hit by rain if you go outside, or being hit by lightning if you go outside when it's raining. Damn good odds. But we now also have synthetic data, which can be used to completely eradicate any identification on data. So I'm saying that to just raise the concerns that people have and show how we can address them. I always want a win-win. Privacy by design is all about win-win, privacy and data utility. So as long as we embed strong privacy protective measures into the smart cities that are envisioned, we can get past this and have amazing data that can be used for very useful purposes, as well as extremely strong privacy.
Thank you. Stefan, if we could turn to you for the next question. For all its faults, the project had some laudable aims. How can these ideas be taken forward and incorporated into other smart city projects?
Well, first of all, I think Anna made a great analysis why it didn't work at Toronto, but the problem still remains. We have the Sustainable Development Goals that have to be reached by 2030, and there are just hardly 8 years left. And I think we have to look at the good parts and learn from those, and especially in this case, from the Toronto project with sidewalks. And as I said, the problem is we have to reach the Sustainable Development Goals and the goals to stop the climate change, and we have 8 years to do that, to the first step. So we have to take action. We have to do radical things, like it's the small steps and small changes aren't simple enough. The problem is that in smart city projects all over the world, where there is like existing cities, and we have to try to adapt some things with mobility, we try to integrate the energy, we have to make more engagement for the people and so on. That's fine, but we're moving like improving 1 or 2 or 3% every year, and that's simply not enough. We have to take radical decisions. We have to be very brave. We have to try things out. As in this case, I think they tried extremely hard, and I did it very well. I totally agree about the problem part with it, but the engagement and probably looking from our experience now, probably Toronto was one of the worst place. You could just step in like an American company and trying to do it remotely. Of course, I'm an architect. I know a lot about participation, engagement, and placemaking, etc., etc. And so I really agree that this have to be embedded in the city. We have to solve real problems for the city. It has to base on unique properties of a city, geographically, historically, also, of course, politically, because it's very, very different to do this in Toronto, to do this in the examples that Anne has mentioned, that are other kind of political structures and have other kind of democracies also. It's like I live in Spain. In Spain, the engagement with the people, it's more, they're more acceptable towards change and things that are driven from, I say, the political side without the citizen engagement in the same way as maybe I'm Swedish. Sweden has also a very, very strong sense of privacy, citizen engagement. So I think if we could handle those problems that Anna and Matt have emphasized on, we really can take the steps necessary, but we also have to have companies that and politicians that are brave and really can make those necessary decisions and create those test beds to change and improve governance, the smart people perspective, to embrace the people, their culture, their quality of work, generate work. We have to potentialize the economy, improve mobility. It's absolutely necessary to solve the mobility problem, and we have to find new ways. And it's not enough to take those small steps. We really have to be radical. And to all this, what I would like to come to is that we come to a situation where we develop smart cities not just based on a simple system integration of connecting mobility with the citizen services of collecting waste and etc. together. It's becoming so much more, and we really have to take those two strong decisions. And I think they're really good examples. I think we can learn from Sidewalk Labs in Toronto, but I think also we can learn from these many development projects in Asia and Middle East and so on. They have a different approach. We have to come together and make a model for each city that can help us to reach the sustainable development goals, because that's the end of this game.
Thank you, Stefan. Very powerful. I wonder, Anne or Mate, if either of you would like to comment about any aspects that were positive and might be taken forward into other projects.
I mean, I think from my perspective, the idea of being ambitious, and Stefan talked about that, that we are in a moment of intersecting crises, and slow incrementalism is not going to do the job here. And so I think that idea of being bold is really central and empowering. I think in some ways we've learned the wrong lessons. Like the idea of a smart city seems to have taken on the image that it has to be a tech city. That smart is by extension a technology. And there's many aspects of a smart city that have nothing to do with tech. And in fact, building a low-tech city might actually be the smart way to go. I mean, we know a lot about building a city that is walkable, that has bike lanes, so a city that has neighborhoods that are mixed use and of a density where people can have access and to all of their daily needs close by. We know about the role of public investment and providing affordable housing and providing long-term care, providing daycare. None of that needs new technologies. We know how to do this. It's a matter of political choices. And I think Stefan spoke a little bit about this, about how to be ambitious, but being ambitious doesn't necessarily have to be inventing new technologies. Yeah. On the tech side of this, just one final thought on the tech side of this is, I think Sidewalk Labs in some ways they walked into a difficult setting, because the previous generation of companies that started to see cities as a tech lab, companies like Uber or Airbnb, I mean, they moved in with this idea of like strategic confrontation, where they were going to come in and set their own rules, and then by extension of their popularity, the governance was going to change. And I think that is just a deeply short-sighted and confrontational and conflictual way of planning a city. And there are many interests, and the unintended consequences, and in some cases the intended consequences of those actions, have made it more difficult for future generations of these companies to build the trust that is going to be needed if they're ever going to have legitimacy building out this and engaging in the city space.
I actually agree with many of the points that Maddie made. One of the problems with the city of Toronto, again with Sidewalk Labs, was they didn't do much consultation with the public. They didn't engage the public who live here, and sort of bring it down a notch from the tech everything to actually having some interaction with the people who are living in this area. And that's critical, to involve them. What do they want? How do they want to get engaged? What kind of tech do they want? Where? And that was one of the biggest problems, which I think they did overlook that. I'm presently working with the city of Mississauga, who is creating a smart city in the next year or two, but they are doing the exact opposite from what Sidewalk Labs did. They're constantly interacting with the public, engaging with them. What do they want? What don't they want? How will this be beneficial? How will we put this to its best use? I think you absolutely have to have that level of interaction in all levels of technology, including none to 100%. You go the full spectrum.
Can I just jump in 1 second?
Please.
To make some debate here, and I don't agree with Matty. I really think, and I'm convinced, that it's impossible to reach the Sustainable Development Goals without a heavy and use of technology that changed almost all models, from mobility to real estate. I think we know about the 50-minute city, etc., to walk, but to solve this problem, we need technology. We can't have these 15 people live, work, and walk around there in an isolated way. They will telework. They will work remotely. They will move. They don't need a car, but they will need different solutions of car sharing based on technology. The video conference. It's the new ways to solve the Sustainable Development Goals is energy. Everything is through technological innovation and new solutions, disruptive solutions, to break away from the way we have done things before.
Can I come back in on that? I love that we're having a discussion and sharing different perspectives. I mean, none of this is to say that technology hasn't had an important role. I mean, it's clear we're talking now over the internet, and we've all learned how to use Zoom in the last 18 months. And again, another technology that has made it possible for many people to keep working through the pandemic. So technology is clearly important. I think the question for me is technology the leading edge of our sustainable city future, or do we think about the idea of smart as the basics of good urban planning, in which technology fits into that that paradigm? So to me, it's a little bit about what leads. And when you attend conferences of people who talk about smart cities, or even that idea, again, just the tagline of Sidewalk Labs, building a city from the internet up, that doesn't evoke to me good urban planning that we're going to integrate technology into. That's the complete opposite. That's the complete inversion to me. We are the technology drives how our cities are, and to me, Anne's comment is spot on. It's about who leads, and the fact that I don't think many people want to live in a city where the tech is dominating. They want the tech to work for them, and the privacy to be and other aspects of the technology to be optimized to them, not them optimizing to the technology. And sometimes when you get too when you listen to the smart cities narrative, it's this tech utopia. Let me make a provocative statement, Stefan, that maybe you disagree with. I mean, I think we have many of the technologies, most of the technologies that we need today to solve the big problems that we face. It's about priorities and investment. And that's where I think our greater challenge is, rather than inventing new technologies to solve problems, many of which are of our own making.
Thank you all. Great points. Well made. And why don't we maybe shift to something that's a little bit non-technical? Economic uncertainty was a reason given by the CEO to pull out of the project. And I wonder, Maddie, if we stay with you for a moment. How vulnerable are smart cities to economic and other shocks?
Cities in general are vulnerable to economic shocks, as are humans and all communities. I think this project was on life support long before before the crisis, and it was on political life support because there were. I mean, Anne mentioned it earlier. There were daily, weekly stories in the newspaper about the conflicts and tensions that were arising around this project. Whether it was on issues of privacy or the size of the site or the project finance. I mean, this project was deeply challenged long before. Cities are both vulnerable, but they're also deeply resilient. And you can see coming out of, through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. Again, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of talk that, was this the end of cities? Were people going to, flee to the wired cottage? And in fact, what you see, at least in this city, is construction has continued apace. In fact, there's a doubling down on the development of transit-oriented communities and trying to integrate public facilities and daycares and libraries and recreation centers and healthcare with public transit and making walkable communities. So in fact, yes, cities are vulnerable, but out of that vulnerability comes an urge to do things different and transformation. And so I think what you're seeing now is actually a doubling down and an increased interest in building cities that are much more equitable. Equity has become a key lens through which we're seeing city building, as well as environmentally sustainable and climate adaptive.
Thanks, Maddie. Now, Stefan, why don't we come to you? And I want to ask you kind of a double question, if I could. We have a great question from the audience from Georgie, who asks, could the panelists start by providing a definition of technology? Is technology solely IT technology? And with that, Stefan, the goal of becoming a smart city, what are the risks around the use of technology that cities need to be aware of? I wonder if you could start with the definitional question. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. First of all, I like the common definition of a smart city is that it's a city that uses information technology or technology in a broader sense to provide the services for the citizens, and through technology provide better and new services. So and the idea of the smart city started sort of not from the 70s, what that was creating economy, etc. But the idea today, when we talk about a smart city, we mean a city that not only have the different services in silos, like mobility, health, welfare, transportation, and so on, and economy and education, but that tie these services together in a platform that we can create these new services in a much better, efficient way, that how we have our identity information in one place and not on 16 different places. So that's sort of the framework for a smart city in a very narrow sense. But what I really would like to answer the question you asked about the goal and the risks. I'm totally aware of the risks of ethics, privacy, and so on, and I couldn't agree more on those. But like to come back also to Matti's answer, I really believe that when we designed cities, like the last change in the cities in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the big changes, that was when we started to design for a city based upon the cars, and person driving around in their own car, priority to the streets where we have 8, 6, 7, 8 lanes full of cars driving individually with huge pollutions, noise, CO2, etc. So, and say that people don't want to live in cities based upon technology, I don't think it's true. I think it's that people love technology when it's implemented well. I think 50% of the people, when you come to a new city, or 100%, walk or drive around aided by Google Maps. and they know exactly where you are and where you want to go. It's your behavior, etc. So, or we would everybody would love to have better medicine, better healthcare, and so on, based upon technology. And we really want to work with the best IT tools and so on. So I really don't think that, say, people don't want to live in a city from a starting point of internet, etc. I really would say, or the opposite. People want to live in a place where there is great social interaction, it's a healthy environment, healthy air, low noise, you can play on the streets, you can be safe, etc., etc. So, and you can involve, you can be private also, of course. So I think the aim has to be to build a city that is capable of integrating all these new technologies together in a follow the vision of getting to the fulfilling the sustainable development goals, which are both they are economic, but they are of course about the social part, integration, accessibility for everybody, a universal design of the cities, and also the technology part. So and the environment overall. So I really think there are great examples of these kind of new designs. I think that the proposal for Toronto was a fantastic vision of how it actually could be. I think there are some problems, but to say that, so I think it's a very cultural thing. And but finding problems for new ways of housing through technology, healthcare through new technology, new ways of working, the whole economic system with the crypto economy and so on, that creating so many more possibilities to embrace and empower the creators and not the big corporations. I think also we have to get away from that. These new kind of technologies are those great corporations like Google, Facebook, and so on. That's the current situation, but that's not where we're going to move. We're going to move towards an information technology where that is distributed and that everybody has their voice and their place and distributed organization. And so I think we can't just say today it's like this, and we can't let these corporations run our cities and societies. But if we look towards the next step, when these are all these crypto economies, the metaverse that everybody's speaking about, those new places, the integration of digital to physical space, I think it's so interesting, and I think we have so much to gain from that. Of course, always keeping an eye on privacy and ethics, especially when AI is going to make better decisions than our politicians are going to do. So that's another way to see it. And I would like, I really want to bring that to the table, that are huge possibilities, but of course we have to be aware of these problems with privacy and ethics and so on.
Thanks, Stefan, fantastic. I wonder, Anne or Matti, would you like to comment?
It's not even that I disagree. It's just the additional measures that will be required. There was mention of AI and how it's coming, and of course, artificial intelligence is going to be huge. There's no question. But the concerns associated with ethics and transparency or lack thereof are just abounding. If we don't look under the hood of AI and figure out exactly what it's doing, the potential for harm, not just for privacy, but for a variety of other areas, bias, insecurity, etc., the potential for harm is considerable. So we have to have transparency and examination of what these technologies are going to be doing. And we need these with, highly skilled people who can understand how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of new technologies making our lives better, I mean, there's no doubt that has happened. And Stefan mentioned Google Maps. Yeah, I used Google Maps yesterday. I mean, it's great. It's a miracle that in your pocket you can have a technology that shows you where to go, like and tells you by voice. I mean, it's on wireless headphones. I mean, it's remarkable. I think the question when you aggregate that up, and the Sidewalk Labs example really brings this home, is, Stefan, you also talked about, you know, many small companies. I mean, I think you could make the argument that actually what Sidewalk Labs was an aggregator trying to bring together the ideas of many small companies and put them under the roof of Google. And actually, that smart cities, the way that the Sidewalk Labs one was actually a consolidator. And that they were going to be that Google was going to play a larger role and start to, in fact, dominate or become the operating system of the smart city, in the same way that that their Android system is the operating system of your phone, or Chrome is now your window into the internet, or YouTube, you know, is your window into videos, right? So I think, in fact, I think actually that we were going in an opposite direction. And I think what many people were saying is we don't want Google to play that role, or Facebook, who's thought about development, or others. What we want is our governments, who we democratically elect, to play that role as the intermediary. And then, as you said, bring in companies and create a space for innovation that is more open, rather than one that's trending much more towards monopoly.
On that theme, I wonder, Maddie or Stefan, is there a danger to competition if cities lock in suppliers with specific technology embedded in the infrastructure? Is that a potential problem?
I mean, all smart cities around the world, they have platform suppliers. So you can't create a smart city or pretend to be a smart city without having a platform that unites your different services. Like we said that earlier, were in silos, but actually makes you gain from the synergy from what you can learn, and the flow of fluent information from one area to another, and sharing information, and creating finally knowledge, if it's possible, through functionalities like machine learning and so on. But I mean, you have when you have a city, you have signed an agreement with a provider, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, whatever. So, and they help you to implement it, and they integrate your different services depending on what kind of platform it is. There are, like, all the big providers, tech providers, like the 20 biggest, they have platforms, and they are doing this. Different kind of areas of the world. It's HP, IBM, or whoever it is. So, the cities also buy and lock in for 4 years or 6 years or 8 years, like the waste management. They look traffic, some kind of traffic controls. They some kind of health care. They all buy these kind of services. So, but I really agree with Matti and Anne that the owner of this coordination, the responsibility has to be on the government, or even better in the future, on the people. I mean, the government, we see a lot. That's a problem in many corrupt countries where democracy doesn't work. The problems with people, younger people, especially if they don't form part of the democratic processes and so on. So I really believe also these technologies could become more a property of the citizens, and with distributed organizations, than just to be within the government. Because I think the traditional governments that talk about democracy and so on, I think it's I'm sorry, but really outdated. I don't think.
Yes.
I think we really have to reinvent democracy, cities, the ownership, but be extremely careful with all these schemes and really discuss it. And the problem is, I think both Matti and Anne agree, we don't discuss ethics about AI in general. People don't discuss their privacy using Google or iPhones every day. They sell their information and so on. So that's the problem. We have to be extremely transparent and aware of that. And I think based upon that, we can find absolutely new revolutionary ways to organize our cities, for citizen participation and ownership of or sharing of the information. Blockchain, for example, permits you to have this identity that Anne is talking about, on the blockchain that you own your information. You know what's done with your information. Estonia, for example, is the most digitalized country in the world, and there the citizens can see, for example, what doctors have accessed their medical records. And in some cases also, they have to give permission to the doctor to do it. And then the doctors have to respond why they looked at it. So it's like, it's a revolution that we have to really change our view and innovate with all these new technologies.
I totally agree with you, Sevan. I totally agree with what you've been saying. There is such an over-reliance on government and trust, which I think is misplaced, actually, because certainly before they become the government, the political parties, this is when I was privacy commissioner for 3 terms, and each term there was a different political party who became the government. And before they became the government, they were all into privacy and protecting people's personal information. It was all big to them. Then they became the government. Everything changed overnight. They wanted control over the information, and they wanted to take over. I mean, it was astounding to me. So I totally agree with you. We need to turn more to the people and get groups of citizens involved, not just relying on the government.
Yeah.
Great. Well said. Well, a final theme as we get towards the top of the hour, and maybe we should start with you, Anne, and we'll come to you, Maddie and Stefan. If you could give advice to help create a successful smart city, what would it be?
And I'll give you the kind of advice I'm giving the city of Mississauga, who's actually embarking on this, is first of all, you have to engage your citizens, the people. Whatever you're planning on doing it, make it very clear to them, engage in them, with them, have group meetings, things of that nature. No surprises. And I'm not suggesting that everyone's going to agree, but at least you will have a sense of that people will consulted and engaged, and it makes such difference. That did not happen with Sidewalk Labs. The other thing that I have mentioned already is in a smart city, the tech is on 24/7. All the sensors, the cameras, everything is on nonstop. There is no opportunity really to obtain consent or have consent revoked because it's just on all the time. And that's why you absolutely must delete and de-identify data at source. You have to have that kind of protection of personal information so that regardless of who is collecting the information, companies, cities, whatever, the minute the data are collected, you immediately strip it of all personal identifiers, which then frees you as well as the city, the organization doing it, because then you don't have to have the fear of privacy risks. You've eradicated that right from the beginning, ensuring the public their privacy will remain intact, and ensuring the providers of the tech and the smart city developers that they're going to have the much needed data they need to develop various activities and programs, etc. So you can have this win-win. That's the whole model of privacy by design, not zero sum, not one interest versus another, multiple positive gains by addressing the needs of multiple groups. The public has to be served, and the tech companies have to have data that they need for their operations. We can do this by de-identifying data at source right at the time it's collected. Thank you.
Matthew?
Anne is completely right about the role of community in these processes. I think that has to be front and center. And I would say seeing tech in the service of people rather than the other way around. We have seemed to see the tech as the end in and of itself, and with some of these companies that are now exceedingly large, the marketing and promotion is able to put the tech so front and center. Like one of the things that was interesting in Toronto is Anne talked about how engagement happened with the community. I mean, the thing that captured everyone's imagination was hexagonal sidewalk tiles that would have lights in them and rain shields for the side of buildings. Like those were the marketing was so powerful and so well done that those were the ideas that captured the public imagination, not what was actually going to be happening in the buildings, or how the financing of this project was going to work, or broader issues of surveillance and data sharing, which ultimately became major cruxes for this project. So I think, I think putting the community aspect first, and then seeing the technology as a way to achieve community ends is really going to be central if smart cities are going to move forward in a way that does promote greater equity, sustainable, and justice.
Thank you, Matty. Stefan?
Yeah, okay, as a recommendation or conclusion of my view, I would say that it really need to start with a vision of a smart city. And I think the vision or ambition has to be, now I think it's doubtless, and it's so well defined to fulfill or reach the sustainable development goals. There are 17 goals and very well defined, and we really have to work, every city has to work through, there actually exists this urban agenda, how to work through these decisions, and or to work through these questions and to reach and define these goals. So that's the first thing we have to do. We have to have a vision of our cities and where we want to go, and it's absolutely necessary now. These are so obvious to me regarding specifically the climate, but so many other social questions also, and economic and other environmental, like the integration of biodiversity and so on. So it's so obvious. So with this vision up front, every city, of course, based on their geography, history, political character, their ambition, the culture, and the people that live there, and what they want to do and how they want the city for the future. But we have to take bold decisions. The cities have to be brave, because we can't solve now. For example, 50, 60, 70% of the citizens have been teleworking, and now they're pretending that we go back to work. That's so absolute everybody, almost everybody, or flexible and so on. But it's so stupid. It's what they should do now. And we get these problems with traffic and the noise and the pollution and so on. Help the companies, give them aid to keep people teleworking. So we solve the source of the problem instead of trying to then change every car to an electric car and deploy infrastructure for electricity and so on. It's like solving like the problems instead of watching this strategy from the beginning with the sustainable development goals that actually will empower the people. If they telework, they can have a family while working, which is, if you commute 2 hours a day, you can't, or it's very difficult. So I think this vision, bold decisions, and then of course start from the bottom up. You have to engage the people, and I think this also the politicians' responsibility to bring up to the table the ethics, the privacy, and start to talk about the problems with these problems, not only when we come to do new things, but from the beginning, so we can have a platform to start from.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you all. I want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists, and also Asite, our forum's lead tech partner. We will be publishing a recording and written summary of this webinar, as well as the presentation online. Please feel free to share with those in your professional network, and take a few moments to let us know what you thought of today's session by completing the online poll, which will appear on your screens at the end of the webinar. Join us for another webinar in the future. We've recently released the WBEF COP26 webinar mini-series. Please see the website for further details. You can watch any previous webinars that you may have missed as well. The World Built Environment Forum Global Summit will be in Dubai as part of Expo 2020 Dubai in January of 2022. The program will focus on the livable city, agile, healthy, and resilient. You can book your ticket today at the super early bird rate. Please visit the website rics.org/WBEF and book for further details on the program. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, where you'll receive news of upcoming webinars as well as recently published articles. Finally, you can download the WBEF app from the App Store or Google Play, where you can access the latest innovative global thought leadership content across the built environment. And with that, I would like to again thank you all, thank our panelists, and until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye. It was a pleasure.
Goodbye. Fantastic. Thanks a lot to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.